Knowledge for Men, episode 47. Welcome to knowledgeformen.com, where boys turn into men, where men turn into leaders, into lions, the ferocious few who stand strong, a place where you grow to become the man you were born to be. It's time to take massive action towards the life you want. Get the health, get the relationships, business, and career you've always dreamed of. Achieve a level of success and happiness that you've been searching for so many years. Life has given you enough, and it's time to take a stand and take full control of your life. Stand with us as we interview the most inspiring and successful leaders to give you real-world advice to crush life and awaken the sleeping giant inside of you. This episode is brought to you by Squarespace. Basically, it's everything you need to create an exceptional website. It's an all-in-one platform that makes it fast and easy to create your own professional website, blog, e-commerce store, or even online portfolio. For a free 14-day trial and 10% off your first purchase, go to squarespace.com and use offer code KNOWLEDGE. It's a really great platform for anyone getting started or looking to switch over to something easy to use with a great design. Again, that's offer code KNOWLEDGE for a free 14-day trial and 10% off. All right, for those of you who feel like you're stuck, you're in the wrong place, whether you're in a job or a relationship, whatever that is, or life's just boring and you're sick and tired of the mundane realities of day-to-day living. And sometimes you just wake up and say, is this it? Well, I've got a really special guest here today who can really help you in all these areas. I'm here with Scott Schimmel. He's the founder and president of U-School, which helps high school and college students unlock their full potential by giving them the tools and guidance to plan a life that's made for them. Scott's an expert at helping people discover who they are, figuring out what they want, and creating plans to make their dreams a reality. Okay, so if you had those problems in the past, if you have any of these challenges, then this is going to be a great episode for you today. All right, Scott, I'm happy to have you on the show. Let's go ahead and get started.
Thanks, Andrew.
All right, Scott, let's jump in with your favorite success quote and why.
The first one comes to mind is this quote. It says, "Rejoice with those who rejoice and mourn with those who mourn." And I had an older mentor years ago tell me that's kind of how he thinks about life is if you've got a friend or you're in a conversation and someone is sharing a story or sharing a moment that they are excited about, something that they can celebrate, that your job as a friend is to help them rejoice, to help them celebrate, to kind of help them go there. And I've just noticed I've missed a lot of those moments. A friend shares a good golf score or shares a good grade they got in a test or a job offer. And I'm just think, well, cool. And I kind of miss those moments. And so that rejoice with them is for me to stand up, give them a high five, a hug, say like, that is awesome. I'm stoked for you. And then on the flip side, I can't tell you how many times I've missed mourning with someone, like when someone shares something that's hard or sad or challenging. I just want to be the type of person that says, dude, that sucks, and I'm sorry that happened. So that's helped really guide how I think about relationships. And for me, success is relationships. How am I caring for the people that I'm interacting with?
Right, so staying present and just acknowledging the emotions, the vulnerability that your friend just shared with you. I mean, it takes a lot to really put your emotions on the line. So when someone does, acknowledge it, embrace it with your friend, because that's probably what they're looking for. Not a solution, but a connection with you. So now, Scott, I really enjoyed that quote, but let's learn more about you. Who are you and how did you get to where you are now? This is a great time for you to share your story and your journey with the audience.
Well, I was one of those guys that was so driven. I had a Wall Street Journal subscription in junior high. I told my dad when I was a freshman in high school that I was going to be a CFO of a large multinational corporation. And so I set my sights on that. I went to a college with a great business school, USD. I had 6 internships in college, and it was literally walking in my dad's footsteps. And those are great steps. And it's a great lifestyle. It's an important profession. But I just realized along the way that even though I could do that and do it well, it's not what I wanted to do, and it's not what I was excited about. So I had this opportunity to work for a nonprofit that did leadership development with college students. And our focus was helping college students get ready for the future. Leadership development, character development, how do you become someone that you want to be for the rest of your life? And along the way, I started to spend some time with alumni, people that had been through the program, young professionals, and just noticed, and a bunch of your listeners could probably relate, that a lot of people don't like what they do for a living. And most of my friends would say, I cannot stand Sundays because tomorrow is Monday. And I started to think about that and play around with that and start asking college students the ones that I was working with. Do you know what you're going to do when you graduate? And I remember the first time I did that, it was a class of 40 seniors at my alma mater at USD, and it was March. I think they were graduating in like 7 or 8 weeks. And one girl out of 40 raised her hand that she had a plan. She knew what she was going to do. And I was shocked. I thought I would have expected like half of them would know. And when I started to ask more, it didn't seem like there was a major or a campus or a department or anything that really did that well. There's, of course, career services, and there's resume writing, and there's interview skills. But who is helping college students? Who's helping people figure out who they are? And not just like, what are you good at? What deserves to be on your resume? But what does it mean for you to live a good life? How do you match up? Because I think we're much more three-dimensional than just what we've done or what our grades say. So how do you match up your values and what's important to you and your experiences and the things you're afraid of, the things you're good at, like all of that stuff? How do you match and look through that as a lens and a filter to say, what does it look like for me to live a really great life with dreams and values and all that stuff? So that led me into U School. There's a couple guys that I partnered with that noticed the same problem, but from a different angle. They've been working with corporate executives for a long time, and I noticed that there's a lot of people that are very successful from the career point of view, but if you ask them, do you like what you do? Many of them say no. Do you believe in the product you sell? No. And pulling back a couple more layers, how's your marriage? Or how are your kids? And you just hear these really sad stories. And their question was, who's helping people discover themselves? And so when we met, we just knew that there was something about that. And the big question is, how come no one really does that? And how come, from a student perspective, you can go to college, you could be in school for 16, 17 years, but not spend one class period thinking about yourself, thinking about who you want to be, and what does it mean for you to live a good life? And so that's where we kind of ended up with U School and discovered there is a huge scratch that needs to be itched, and we think we're doing that.
And Scott, you're doing such great work. You're going out there and impacting so many lives. And I've looked at the site and I've seen a ton of testimonials of people who are really seeing huge transformations in their life. Let's now take a step back and look at some of the challenges that you've encountered while creating the U School. I'm sure this hasn't been an easy ride the whole entire way, even though the problem exists, but building something like this has got to be tough to convey and to try and actually sell.
One of the failures I had was for about 3 years, I was helping college students discover their strengths, discover what they're good at and what they're passionate about. And I really felt like my job was done. There'd be very clear, powerful moments where I'd spend one-on-one with students or with a group of students, and they would, through the process I take them through, really discover, this is what I'm good at and this is what I'm excited about. And I would walk away and kind of give them a high five and say, good luck. And then it took me a while to want to evaluate, wanted to look at, did that stuff stick? Did those people, my friends, did they go and then step into what they're supposed to do? Did they follow their dreams after they discovered their strengths? Are they now living out of them? And I discovered I was really bummed. It was not happening. And I think that was a period in my life that was a failure because there's all these people that they wanted to figure themselves out. They gave the time, they gave the energy, and I just didn't help them very much. And over that time, I think that's formed into what we do with U School, where it's not just about your strengths, but we think it's equally as important to know what your weaknesses are, to know what you're afraid of and how that's going to hinder you, to know how failure has already impacted your life, to know if you're bad at math, let's say, as an example. If you're bad at math, is it because you suck at math and you're just not wired for it? Is it because you've had a really bad attitude towards it? Or is it because you've had bad teachers? Like, what is it about that challenge that you need to be aware of? So we want to help people discover the deeper stuff, the stuff that they need to get healing from, the stuff they need to get freed from, because everybody's got junk in their lives, and we want to help people to work out of that junk so it doesn't hinder them for the rest of their lives. So they don't wake up at 80 wishing they had done something different.
So Scott, how have you applied this into your own life, and what are some examples of this?
Yeah, I've been a big believer in therapy, going to see counselors that can help me through wisdom and through wise practices, explore my past, to explore where I come from in terms of a family, to understand while there's tremendous values and things I learned from my family, there's also some stuff that I learned that I don't want to carry on. I don't want to carry on now that I'm a father or as a husband, stuff I don't really want to carry on as a career. I think, not to pick on my dad by any means, but he's been one of those guys that works 60, 70, 80, 90 hours a week for 38, 39 years. And I just recognized over time that when I wasn't getting stuff accomplished, I felt really bad about myself. And through counseling, discovered that I can't go at that pace. And doing nothing sometimes is actually a really good thing to do, relaxing and rejuvenating and being with my kids. And I just decided to take a different path. So looking inward is a really helpful thing as long as you don't get stuck there and lost there. And for me, I need people that are asking me tough questions. And I need to have a practice of self-reflection so that I can become more aware and more confident about who I am, so I can work through some stuff. Because I think we all got junk that we need to work on.
And as men, in today's society, we sometimes hold the junk or the problems inside, and we don't want to reveal that we're actually struggling to others. So we put on this mask of strength, which is manly and confident, and it shows that we're a real man in today's society. But really, this can be damaging if it really piles up inside and you don't let these emotions out, or you don't share with others that you're really struggling or need help. So what are your thoughts on that, Scott?
Yeah, we've kind of built that into something we do with U School. And to that point, we all need help, but it's hard to ask for help. And then it's, I think, challenging to know what to ask for. So for U School as students, and students can mean student age, they can also mean adults, but students who go through U School, they're asked to pick an advisory board. People in their life that they trust, people that don't have an agenda for them, but they tell them the truth. Like you can always tell the mom that just says everything you do is awesome, or the dad that always criticizes you. Like those aren't people that you want to give. They're going to give you advice no matter if you ask them or not. But who are the people you really respect their opinion that can help you understand yourself better? So we have this format where you go and pick your advisors. Pick someone maybe in your family that you really trust. Pick a friend that's just kind of one of those wise friends. I've got this buddy Caleb that for every life decision, he's just like one of my go-to guys. Even though we're the same age, been through many same things, he just has that gift of wisdom that I want to turn to. And then finally pick someone that's maybe in the professional environment that you're interested in going into. And along this journey of self-exploration, go to those folks and ask very pointed questions. Ask them questions about your strengths. Ask them questions about your weaknesses. Ask them about their dreams, about their failures, so that you can learn from them. And I think there's something about asking for help. Everyone says yes to that. Everybody wants to be a part of your life. They are genuinely interested in you. So giving them specific roadmap for how to do that and who to ask and what to talk about, that's a big deal. I think everybody needs an advisory board.
Absolutely. And I think that's a very powerful thing for you to be doing with young students. I mean, that's something that even us as adults, as men in 20s, 30s, 40s, and 50s and beyond, it's like we're not even doing that kind of stuff. So for you to be doing that with students is profound. That's huge. And that's going to really provide some transformational results for these students. But that was something that you do in the U School program. And just so the audience can get a better idea of how the U School program works, like what it looks like in action, can you go ahead and share a little bit more about your program?
Yeah, we take students through, it's about 12 hours, and it's pretty flexible is that once a week for an hour, is that once a week for an hour and a half, or once a month? But for student experience, we take them through sequenced questions. And so a lot of people ask, what is U School? Is it a curriculum? And I always tell students, like, it's not lame in the traditional way that a lot of programs are. No offense to other programs, but there's no acronym that we have for success. We don't have like a 12-step principles to being the awesome person. We have a bunch of very basic, simple questions that we think are questions that every single person needs to wrestle with, that needs to think about, needs to have conversations about. So the typical format, we put a set of questions in front of a student on a topic, like your weaknesses, give you, let's say, 10 minutes to do some self-reflection. Write some thoughts down, bullet points, paragraphs, draw pictures. Think about it on your own. Then after like 10 minutes or 15 minutes, find a partner, someone that's around you that's also going through it, and share some of the stuff you're thinking about. And it's not just about sharing, but I think that's powerful. Sharing something maybe you've never shared before. Maybe it's even embarrassing. And when you look at someone and you share it and they're not bummed about you, they're not embarrassed for you, they just look at you and think, well, that's no big deal. There's something that's affirming, there's something validating, there's something even healing about that. But then there's not just the sharing, there's also the listening. I don't know about you, but sometimes I understand myself better as I listen to other people share about their lives. And sometimes I think like, oh, that is so not me, and helps me understand how I am. Or I hear something that I resonate with in someone else's story, and I think I didn't have the language for that, but that's how I think too. That's what I'm like as well. So as we're doing that peer-to-peer conversation in a group setting, it's It's really powerful to be able to be in a group where the reason we're together is to be out for each other's best interests. And that's so rare. I think that's the opposite experience most of us have. In school, with a group of friends, like, we're not making fun of each other in youth school. We are genuinely interested in helping each other become who we're supposed to become. So just that environment of trust is huge. And then we send in people to run and facilitate these groups. We call them youth school guides. And those guides are ones that are telling their own stories. They've already kind of been on the journey of self-awareness and exploration and discovery of themselves. And so the student experience, it's quick, it's extremely interactive. I haven't heard a student that says it's boring or too long, but all these insights are happening. People are sharing about their lives. People are opening up. Sometimes students will say, this is like group therapy. I think to some degree it is, if group therapy means we're getting together to talk about what's inside of us and what we hope for and what we're afraid of. In that way, yeah, it has some elements of that. But it's about our future. And it's about where we're headed. So that's kind of the day in the life of a youth school student. And what we're seeing from students is just tremendous impact that they don't get to experience in other places.
And Scott, what are some of those questions that you ask the students that, they should wrestle with these questions that they don't normally ask themselves? And then also for the listeners, should be asking yourself these questions too when Scott says them.
Well, speaking of that, that's one of our questions is what pisses you off? And I remember asking that question to a group of students with the administrators of the high school there, and I just felt awkward because it's one of those questions that everybody loves to talk about. Like, when you ask what pisses you off, everybody has a list. And maybe it's people that cut me off on the road, or maybe it's people that talk too much, or people that always talk about themselves. I don't know, but our point is you are unique in what pisses you off. What pisses you off is different than what pisses someone else off. We know that when you're around a friend and they're just all worked up about something and you don't know why. You're like, what's the big deal? There's something unique. There's like a fingerprint. And a part of exploring that and even verbalizing what pisses you off, I think, it can be clarifying. There's a reason that irritates you. There's maybe even perhaps like a calling hidden in the midst of that. If you're in an organization and it really pisses you off how inefficient things are, then you might actually be the one that's supposed to bring some efficiency and some order. If you're in a group of friends and it pisses you off when people talk over each other, you might be the one to kind of set some ground rules for how conversations can go better. And so we ask questions like that, very common questions. What inspires you? What keeps you up at night? And there's a student recently that said, I've heard 1,000 times I'm supposed to figure out my purpose and find my passion and live my calling, all those cliches. And with youth school, we've kind of broken down, how do you do that? How do you actually figure out your purpose? How do you explore your calling? How do you figure that? There's a formula to that, and most people have no clue what to do besides maybe the clouds will part and the heavens will speak and show you this is your purpose. But we're not really into that kind of theory. I think we're a little bit more into the idea that we can explore ourselves and understand ourselves to a much greater degree than we normally do.
And Scott, can you share maybe a student who did a complete 180 in their life after attending the youth school program?
Yeah, one of my favorite stories, there's a kid in an inner city high school, and as he was going through, we were talking about failure and in what way has failure shaped your life. And I didn't know him too well, but I knew he wasn't a great student. So at this one point, he raised his hand and he goes, I'm terrible at school. And the whole class laughs because I think they knew that he's just awful. He's like, I'm failing all my classes. Every single one of my classes, I'm failing right now. And he goes, but the thing of it is that today, as we're going through this exercise, I started to ask myself these questions. Am I stupid? Is that why I fail classes? And he's like, no, I'm not stupid. I'm actually pretty smart. And he's like, then I asked myself, do I want to fail? Do I want to be a failure? He's like, of course not. Why would you want to fail school? Doesn't make sense. You'd be stupid if you wanted to fail. And he goes, but I'm realizing that I am doing exactly what's expected of me. He goes, when I go home, I get phone calls at my house, and when I answer the phone, it's usually my aunt or my grandma. And if it's my aunt, she knows that I'm failing classes. She knows that I'm an awful student, and she just rips me apart. Like, what an embarrassment you are to the family. You're never going to be anything. You're never going anywhere. And she just yells at me, just puts me down. And he goes, but Grandma, she's even worse. He's like, Grandma called last week, and Grandma's like, if your grandfather were still alive, he'd be ashamed to share your last name. He goes, Grandma's so mean. And he goes, today I'm realizing the reason I'm failing classes is because they tell me I'm a failure. But, and this is, I'll maybe edit it for your listeners. He goes, I'm going to go home today and tell grandma to shut the F up, and I'm never going to fail a class again. And the entire class was like standing up on their desk, like, you go. Like, you change that story, because it's powerful, the expectations people have on you. And sometimes those are like the negative expectations, like for that kid. But sometimes they're positive, like people in our family are doctors or lawyers. And that might be a good story, but that might not be your story. That might not be what you should do. So it's really helpful to examine those expectations. We just continue to see students say, here's what I'm supposed to do, like the trajectory I'm on, but I'm just not going to go down that path. I want to go down my path. And with people, their stories are far from done. So we just kind of get to be a part of giving them some tools and perhaps giving them some courage to go and chase their own path.
Okay, that was a very powerful story of that inner city high school kid. But on the contrary, do you have somebody who, they have a good background, they have a good family, and like you said, doctors, lawyers, accountants, and they want their son or daughter to follow that same path? Do you have anybody who's coming from that angle, where they're kind of forced or given a roadmap, a life that they didn't get to draw, they didn't get to write? It was a story that was already written for them, and maybe they kind of want to write their own story.
Yeah, there was this other kid that said, I want to be a doctor. And that's what I've been setting out to do since I was little. And we just asked some very basic questions like, have you ever been around a doctor? And do you like blood? And even questions that he hadn't thought about, like, are you good at math? And he's like, no, I'm terrible at math. I'm like, well, did you know to become a doctor, you have to get pretty good grades in college? And a lot of those classes will require you to be really good at math. And are you good at running a business? Because a lot of doctors, they have to become business people. And just to help people have their eyes open to, you're on this path, but are you sure you're doing what you should be doing? Do you know what you're getting into? Like a friend of mine that really she loved the idea of being a therapist. She just thought that'd be great to have a really big impact on people's lives. And then she's like, I got a master's. I spent 4 years in grad school getting this degree to go do therapy. She goes, the first day I go to be a therapist, I go into this little tiny quiet office. I didn't see more than 2 people for 8 hours. I'm in the most quiet place on earth. And she's like, I just wanted to rip my hair out. I had no idea. She's like, if I could have just sat down with a therapist 4 years before and found out that's what a therapist does, I never would have done it. I would have done something else where I can make an impact with lots of people. And there's just closing that awareness gap for people is huge. And I think that's why you need to know how to explore the paths that you're going down and to know even how to explore what options there are. I was a business accounting major, and as far as I could tell, there were 3 paths to go down. Go into marketing, go into management, whatever that means, or go into finance. And now that I'm on the outside of school and the other side, I know there's probably 30,000 different iterations, different paths to take. But I didn't know that, and I didn't even know how to figure that out as a college student. So I think we need to become people that not only know ourselves really well, but know how to insert ourselves, know how to place ourselves in different places, or else we're just going to get lost and stuck.
And I think there's some listeners on here today who are experiencing that, whether they're in college or out of college, but they don't really know what they're doing. And I hate to say it, but kind of like a zombie. And I've been there, just going through the motions and not even realizing that you could be doing something that matters to you. So Scott, what should they be doing to discover what it is that they want to do? And what kind of questions should they really be asking themselves?
Yeah, where in a lot of ways it's like this pursuit for your dream job, which if I were honest, it would mean a lot less work and a lot more vacation and a lot of prestige. And I think that's skipping so many steps, because as you go and try to put something else on for size, it's 1, you don't know what it's like, and 2, you don't know if you can do that job well. So I think there's this whole journey to go on before you start figuring out where can I fit myself in. And I think ultimately what I'm trying to do is figure out for someone, what is it that you do? What is the natural thing that you do no matter where you are? What are you known for when you're in a group of people or you're in a group setting? What is the thing that you would do even if no one paid you to do it? For me, I think it's unlocking potential in other people. I just have noticed since I was little, that's what I do. That's what I do when I work. That's what I do when I hang out with friends. That's what I do when I coach Little League. It's just about unlocking potential. And then when I look at career options, it's infinitely easier to look down a path and say, okay, high school English teacher, can I do what I do there? Can I unlock people's potential? Of course, absolutely. I could do that there. Then I look down another path and say, okay, HR, like human resources of a large tech company. And I'll go try that on for size, and that will be the filter for which I have conversations. And I'll probably say, yeah, I can do that there. And I could probably be, I don't know, a college basketball coach and do that. But when I get to like the true north of who I am, it becomes a lot easier to explore my options. But if I'm exploring my options before I know that, it just gets so confusing, and you get stuck in that like resume game, which is just really, really discouraging.
I've been there. And just updating my resume was something I would always do. If I got a new job, instantly update the resume. If I attended this leadership event, update the resume. And I felt that resume was my ticket to success. It was the path, the only thing that, I had that I could use to move forward.
Right. Yeah. And there's something about, I think people generally have two theories for how to figure themselves out or how to find the right job. One is just pray and hope and wish that the right thing comes to me. And I used to think that someone out there, a group of people or someone, they're watching the potential I have. And at some point, they're just going to come to me and say, Scott, we've been watching you. We know how amazing you are. We want to recruit you to this perfect job. And that's kind of like the prayer in a dream theory. And the other one, and so by the way, that probably won't work for you. The other one is like the trial and error theory. And that's what your dads and your uncles and your professors say. You got to get out there and just do something. And it's true. You do. You need to go get a job. You need to pay the bills. But the trial and error theory gets you stuck at some point. At some point, it's too late to try because the errors get too big, because you get a family or a mortgage or bills or too much risk. And so go and try something, but do it with a much clearer sense of the real you. And so I am not into any of those theories. I don't like the trial and error theory because it takes too long. I don't like the prayer and a wish because it's too risky. I'm more into hacking yourself, like really trying to figure out how do I tick, what gets me up at night, all that stuff. And some of that I'm going to know and some of that I'm not going to know. And that's where I need to get feedback from people that I trust to help me close that gap of what I know and what I don't know. And so going through that process, a very simple process, but a very eye-opening and very challenging process of...
And what's that process?
Well, I think it's going through a set of questions to first, we call it finding you, figure out in what ways has your past shaped who you are today? In what ways has your past helped you, hurt you, damaged you, encouraged you, all those sorts of things. The clothes that you wear, that's something, saying something about you. Even the neighborhood you grew up in, the friends you've been around, everything has influenced you to today. So the first stage, I think, is finding you, like finding out who I am today. And the next stage is defining you. Once you know who you are, now how do I match that up with things that are important to me and dreams that I have for the future and values that I'm just going to set for my life, that this is important to me, and being with family is important to me, and making an impact, becoming like really defined about this is the kind of person I'm going to be. And then a third stage is, we call it unleashing you. What are the tools that I need now? What are the credentials? Who are the people? What are the skills? Like, how do I take all that I am and all that I want to be, and then now go and get what I need to live that? So that process, well, we do it in 12 hours. It's doable. It's a doable process, and we're watching it work with people.
And now, Scott, that you're starting to see some success, kind of looking back and kind of reflecting on this experience of when you had that aha moment when you noticed people weren't really happy and satisfied with the things that they were doing, what were some of the biggest lessons you've learned since you started?
Well, I think the biggest thing we've learned is that people want help understanding themselves. I'd say literally every time I share what U School is with people, whether it's principals, whether it's parents, whether it's kids, it just resonates. People want to know who they are. They need help figuring out how to live the life they desperately want to live. And that's been a cool thing to have that resonate. I think with any entrepreneurial venture, I think if someone tells you everybody wants this, or there's a market for this, that usually means someone else is already doing it. You just don't know that yet. And yet with U School, there's just a core human desire. And I don't know if you might call it a spiritual desire. I think everybody just wants to live their lives. And they want to be authentic, and they want to live life well. And so to be able to provide a platform or a process that's very accessible and replicable and scalable, that in of itself is a great gift. But I've also learned that there's tremendous challenges. There's challenges to get people to change how they think. There's challenges to implement a program into an education system that is already very pinched in so many ways. There's bureaucratic thinking, there's funding challenges, there's lots of things that, as we like to say in our U-School team, there's always a problem and we solve problems. That's what we do. So there's no shortage of problems. If there's a day without a problem, that probably means I've been playing golf, not working. There's just always something, there's always some crisis, there's always something that I don't know how to do, there's always something that I haven't done before, there's always something I need wisdom upon. There's a continual challenge, and people in themselves are challenging folks. They're complex, and what works for somebody doesn't work for the next. And people share things that you're not sure what to do with. And sometimes they share things that are worrisome and dark. And I know that I'm not a therapist, and I know I'm not Jesus, and I know I don't know how to fix people's problems. But I do know that there's something powerful about helping people talk about that in a safe environment, and then telling them, you ought to go get help on that. You ought to explore that. So we've been learning a ton, and I think at this point in the U-School journey, we're seeing the process validated in many different types of people, with corporate execs to young professionals to inner city students to high achievers. We're just seeing it work. And I think now what we're excited about is just to see it grow. We just want to take what we have, what we've created and what we've learned, and just share it. Let other people experience it. We want, in some humble way, we want every single person to go through U-School, to have the opportunity to go through this process to understand themselves. Because we think it's ridiculous, those statistics of 70% of the workforce that's disengaged and people that are depressed and turning into things that won't feed their souls. And we just think that's not right. And we live in America. We don't need to get stuck in that. Let's help people figure themselves out and live the best lives.
Very powerful. And I like that you mentioned, people are doing things that don't serve them because maybe it's because they're not doing what matters to them. And maybe if they started to really discover themselves and started doing work that really they cared about, they wouldn't have to drink. They wouldn't be depressed. They wouldn't be watching so much TV. They wouldn't be just wasting a lot of time on social media. They'd be so focused and so happy on what they were doing, they wouldn't have time for that other stuff. It's very powerful. So U-School is just really making a large impact on the world. And now, Scott, let's enter the knowledge round. Have you ever tried to set up a website and just give up? Did you get overwhelmed? Was there just so much content available that you just put that project aside? Well, Squarespace makes it easy to quickly get a professional site up and running so you can focus on doing the things that you like doing and not coding. Squarespace is constantly improving their platform with new features, new designs, and even better support. They have beautiful designs for you to start with and all the style options you need to create a unique website for your personal taste and brand. It's incredibly easy to use, and if you need support, I know Squarespace has an amazing support team that works 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. They even have a great support team with over 100 employees. I guess in New York City, the office has been codenamed the Care Bear Lair. And that's not it, guys. You can get started for as little as $8 a month, and this includes a free domain name if you sign up for a year. It's a great deal, and that includes hosting, you guys. Every design automatically includes a unique mobile experience that matches the overall style of your site. So your content will look great on every device every time. That's really big, guys. Mobile is the future. If you sign up for Squarespace, make sure to use offer code KNOWLEDGE to get 10% off something that I worked out for you guys on your first purchase and to show support for Knowledge for Men. Again, that's offer code KNOWLEDGE. Welcome to the Knowledge Round, where the guests will be asked rapid-fire questions to give the audience invaluable pieces of wisdom to help transform their lives. Starting in 3, 2, 1, showtime. All right, let's go. Scott, how would you explain U-School to a parent?
Yeah, to a parent, if it's the mom, I would say, how confident are you that your kid is going to choose the right path for them that's going to make sure that they are well taken care of, but also living who they're supposed to be? And to the dad, I usually say, how confident are you that your son or daughter is going to stay in school, pick the right major up front, not waste any time, get out on time? Because if your kid goes to my school, my alma mater, and you lose a semester because you weren't sure if sociology was right for you, and then you switch to psychology or something, that's a $31,000 mistake. So we are the ones that help your kid make smarter, wiser choices about who they are and who they're supposed to be.
I like the different answers for mom or dad.
It's very stereotypical.
And what advice would you give someone who's feeling lost or unsure of their path and purpose in life?
Well, I would say that they could find great comfort in the wave and sea of humanity that also is unsure of their purpose. But I'd also give them great confidence that there are ways to discover that. And it's not magic, it's not voodoo, it's not waiting for the clouds to part. You can understand yourself better today if you're willing to ask yourself some of those questions, if you're willing to go there and do the self-awareness. And honestly, not everybody is. And I think it's a little bit more the older generation. Some people just don't want to examine themselves. But what I find with young people, I'd say anyone under 35, I think people genuinely really want to discover themselves. So I think when you're feeling hopeless and lost, it's because oftentimes you're discouraged and you can't see a way out. And so I think what I would prefer to, one, it's going back to that, mourn with them. Mourn with if you're in a tough spot, I just want to say, I get that. I understand that. I've been there. It's a terrible feeling. It's not a good place. But I also want to give them some tools. I want to give them some steps. I want to help them know that you don't have to stay stuck there, and you won't be stuck there a year from now if you choose to engage in a process.
And Scott, what are 3 powerful questions that you ask your students that the listeners could ask themselves right now?
Well, one is, who are you? Who are you now? And what is the story that you're already telling about your life? What is the trajectory that you're on? Those are all probably 3 different ways to ask the same question. If you don't do anything else, where will you end up? And I think the other question that really has shaped me, especially when I was a college student, when I was 20, was what would be the worst case scenario of me at 40 years old? What is my nightmare at 40? And that was really crystallizing. I can see who I didn't want to be at 40. And I knew at the age of 20 that I was exactly on that path. That unless I did major intervention, unless I did some major steps, that I would end up with the person that I was afraid of becoming. If you ask some of those questions, you're getting to a place of, I don't know if desperation is the right word, but fear isn't always bad. Fear can be a great motivator. And I want to make sure people are aware of where they're headed. And if that's not where you want to be, then change directions now.
All right. And Scott, can you name someone who's had a tremendous impact on your life? What did he or she say to you?
I've got one of my best friends is Charlie, and Charlie and I went to college together. And Charlie was one of the first guys that I knew that really wanted to talk honestly about how he was doing. And I had never experienced that before. I had a lot of good friends. We talked about a lot of things, but never how are you really doing? How are you feeling? And to this day, 15 years later, Charlie and I call each other once or twice a day and leave messages and talk once or twice a week. And it's still the same kinds of conversations. How are you really doing? Not just what are you doing, because that's, I think, the typical guy conversation. What have you been up to? What are you doing next? Where have you been? Those are fact questions and geography questions. But he's the one that's kind of taught me the great value of the why questions and how are you questions, because that's actually the stuff that really matters. And when I get together with him, I don't even know if we talk about what we've been doing lately, because it's less relevant that I've been to a Chargers game or I've been working out or playing tennis or trying to work on my golf game. It's way more relevant. What am I afraid of for my kids? And what's challenging for me at work? And what are the things that I'm excited about for my marriage in the next year? Those are the deeper stuff. And so he's had profound impact on me, and yet now it's so normal. It's become just normal for us to have those kinds of conversations, and for me to have those conversations with other guys too. But he was really the first that, in a lot of ways, we taught each other how to do that.
And we talked about this briefly earlier, but do you think it's because we're men and we're scared to be vulnerable?
Yeah, I think as men, we need permission to do something else. And I think permission comes from seeing older people model for us what it looks like to be honest and authentic. And frankly, most of us haven't had that. And I don't know why, and I know people do know why. There's experts out there for why men are like that. I just know for me, I needed to be around some safe people that were willing to go there. And I need to take risks, and I need to share, and I need to ask questions, and I need to be just okay with that discomfort for a while. And after a while, it's not so uncomfortable and it's not so weird. And I remember recently, I was just in a total networking situation, just asking. I was standing next to this guy, and it was just one of those situations where he and I just kept standing next to each other. So I just kept asking him questions. And what's normal for me is just ask him kind of the deeper questions, like, what are you excited about? And at one point, after I asked him maybe 12 questions in a row, and he wasn't asking me any questions, he just turns to me and he goes, whoa, you ask a lot of questions. And he was kind of like, stop it. Like, I don't want this anymore. And I just wanted to back off, like, dude, sorry. And afterwards, I just realized, like, he just hasn't done that. And he hasn't been comfortable with that. And not a shame on him, but shame for him. And maybe I can be a small part of, that was a refreshing conversation. And I wonder if I can have those kinds of conversations with the people that I really care about. So I think as men, we just need the permission. We need to know what it looks like. And a lot of times we need expectations. Like, let's just do that. I remember I had this friend in college, Dave, my best friend in college, roommate, and we called them one-on-ones. And one of us, maybe every 2 or 3 months, would say, hey, can we have a one-on-one? Which in our coded language was, can we have a real conversation? Can we talk about some of the harder things going on? Can I share with you something I'm afraid of or something that's not going well? Other than that, it was just like video games and sports and going to the beach and going to see movies and just hanging out, being friends. But when one of us said, can we have a one-on-one, we knew the expectation was that we would go deep. And so I think guys sometimes need, like, not just permission, but here's the expectations. In this setting, in this relationship, at this time, we're going to go there.
I like that. And I think it's really important that guys start having those deep conversations, those real conversations, like you mentioned, to really share your emotions and be vulnerable and be heard. I think it can do a lot for a lot of guys out there. And now, Scott, let's go into what are your 3 most influential books and why?
Oh, that is a tough question. I really like Tribes by Seth Godin. I think the way he phrases a movement and leadership is just so easy and so compelling. And I read that probably 4 or 5 years ago, and it just clicked. A lot of things clicked for me about, I am a tribal leader, and I'm looking for people that have shared interests, and I want to be the one that facilitates communication. So Tribes is one. There's this great book called Everything Belongs by a Franciscan priest named Richard Rohr. And Richard Rohr writes a lot about justice, a lot about spirituality, a lot about prayer. But Everything Belongs is, in a nutshell, it's this book about, like, everything in your life you need to pay attention to. Everything in your life, the good and the bad, it is, because it's happened, it's real. So pay attention to it. And so it, in a lot of ways, just became the framework for how I look at life. And back to that, rejoice with those who rejoice, mourn with those who mourn. It all belongs. It all deserves attention. And then the book that's changed me more than anything else is this book called Divine Conspiracy. It's by a professor at USC, philosophy professor. He actually just passed away probably 6 months ago. And it's the book I would take on a deserted island. And I've read it probably 18 times. I read 10 pages, it takes me an hour, but every single time I learn something new. And it's just talks about life and what are we up to in life, and helps us understand, like, what does it look like to live well? And so that's the book that I love that book.
Wow, it's actually quite rare this deep into my podcast series that I don't recognize the books. I've heard of Tribes, but I haven't heard of those other 2.
There you go, 2 out of 3.
All right, Scott, got a scenario here for you. Imagine you had 60 seconds with your 20-year-old self. What would you tell him to do, and what would you tell him not to do?
Well, I think my 20-year-old self, I am surprised of how courageous I was, because when I chose to go work for a nonprofit, where I had to fundraise my own salary, I think I might have made a minimum wage coming out of college, but I knew that I was turning down a job offer with one of the top accounting firms in the world. I knew what that path was. And so I think if I go back to my 20-year-old self, I would have said, it's going to be okay. Like, just choose that. Like, be yourself. And you're going to be all right. Because a lot of that uncertainty, will I be okay? Will I live the life I want to live? Will I have an impact? I would just go back and say, game on. Thumbs up, high five, just go. And I don't have, just, yeah. But at the same time, I think as a 20-year-old, I'm 33 now, I wasn't that deep of a soul. I don't know if I was really thoughtful. I just kind of knew I wanted to go do that, and it sounded fun. And I knew it was different, but I didn't know how different. I knew it was going to take me down a path, but I didn't know how deep that path would be. I didn't really know that I was burning bridges on the previous life. I thought, I'll just go try this nonprofit thing for a little bit, and I'll go back into business. I didn't know that if you don't go into accounting, basically, right at graduation, you're probably never going into it because the shelf life of your knowledge is really short, and no one was going to hire you. So I'm glad I didn't know that because I might not have chosen that. But be courageous. Like, go and chase the dreams you have.
I like that. That's very profound. And Scott, if you could offer a newborn child one piece of advice that he or she would open up when they graduate from college, what would that be?
That's a good question because I just had a newborn recently. So I've got 3 kids, and for my kids, I knew when our second kid was born that people just come out the way they are because my son is so different than my daughter. And I think before I would have said it's a lot about how you shape them, it's a lot about how you parent them, it's a lot about their environment, but they couldn't be more different if we had tried. And then now we have another daughter, and she's her own person. And I think it would have been, you are okay. Like that, there's that message, like whoever you are, between newborn and 20, you're gonna get a lot of damage done to you. It's called middle school, and it's called like prom. Like there's gonna be a lot of damage, but you're okay. The way you are is exactly the way you should be. And go be you. And I think when we die, and if it's the pearly gates or not, and let's say St. Peter's, I don't know how that all works, but I have a feeling if we get there and we've been trying to be someone that we're not, or we've been trying to be someone that our parents wanted us to be, or someone else, or just the coolest person on Fortune magazine was, like, I have a feeling God's going to say, you know what? I wanted you to be you for a reason. How come you weren't you? And if there's any message, I think that's it. Like, be you, and you're okay.
And this brings up that famous Oscar Wilde quote, "Be yourself, everybody else is already taken." Very powerful stuff. And Scott, what's one underrated characteristic that you think every person should work on, and if they did, they would see massive results?
I think the most underrated characteristic is clarity. In the age these days of learning how to give your elevator pitch, I sat around recently to a bunch of young entrepreneurs who were introducing themselves in a sentence or two, and I could not discern the mumbo-jumbo BS any of them were saying. I just couldn't, it was not clear who they were or what they do. And recently this college kid, actually he just graduated, sent me a note and he said, "Hey, would you be willing to introduce me to some professionals? I've finally figured out what I want to do. And I know you have a bunch of friends. And so I'm looking into advertising or finance." And I just started laughing. I'm like, "Dude, you have no clue what you want to do." And so I just wrote back, like, very graciously, "No, I won't introduce you to people." But I think when you get clarity, I think it becomes way less important, your resume or your skill set. If you can look someone in the eye with clarity and conviction, which I think is a close cousin of clarity, to say, "This is who I am. This is how I know it's true because I got a story to back. I got 5 stories to back up. This is how I am." If you take a chance on me, I promise you this is who I will be. If you have that clarity and that conviction, I think people will take a risk on you. And if you don't have that clarity, if you do the traditional interview tricks and games, and I'm a really hard worker, and my biggest weakness is that I care too much and I try too hard, like all that stuff that career services people tell you to do, it's just BS. Figure out who you are and then own it and tell people that. And they will say, "Wow, that sounds great. I'd love to have you here." And we'll create a role for you, or we'll give you the skill set that you need. So go and get clear, people. Get clear about who you are.
All right, getting clear. And Scott, what's your philosophy on life and success?
Well, my philosophy in life is that we're here to be ourselves and to be nobody else. And I think I'm a Christian, and for me, I'm not about doing the things I'm supposed to do. I'm about doing the things that God would do if he were me. And I look at the life of Jesus, and I can list off probably more reasons than anybody else can for why people don't like Christians or the church. But when you look at Jesus, it's really, really hard to not be stoked about who Jesus was and what he did. And for me, I just want to spend my life trying to emulate him and trying to do the things that he would do. Not me do if I was him, but him do if he were me. Like living in San Diego and running youth school and having 3 kids. Like, what would the character be like? What would the choices he makes? What are the values? Like, I want to be like him because I think he was awesome. And I think he lived a life that was just totally epic. And so for me, it's that constant recalibration to, is this the way Jesus would do it? And if not, then I need to figure out why. and I want to figure out how to get more of him in me.
I think being like Jesus, yeah, that's a great role model to have. You can't go wrong there, that's for sure. And now, Scott, what kind of parting piece of guidance do you have for the thousands of listeners today as we're coming to a close?
Well, I would say first, find a couple friends that you can trust. Go ask them if they would help you figure yourself out, and then get to work. Buy a journal, get a diary, get the U School curriculum. Just open up a set of questions and start working with them. And don't get lost and self-consumed, but really start examining yourself. Maybe sounds too Oprah, but every day at the end of the day, take some notes down. What were the times today that I would love to do over again? What were the moments today that I felt like I was rocking it, that I was good? And what are the moments that sucked? What are the moments that I just never want to do again? And do that for a month, do that for a week, and then just sit with a couple friends and make some observations. I bet you'll see a lot of patterns. I bet you'll see a lot of things come out that you didn't know about yourself, but they're totally true. So get to work, become an investigator about yourself, do like CSI on your own life, and figure yourself out.
And I think that is the first step that everyone should take to their path on self-discovery. And Scott, that's going to conclude the knowledge round. Thank you so much. Now let's go into what's exciting you today, Scott.
Well, honestly, what excites me is being around people and giving them the tools to think about themselves. And I get to do that every day. So for U School, now that we're in a growth phase, we really spent a lot of time last year trying to figure out, does this work? Does our program work? Now we feel like, yes, it does work. So let's grow this thing. And so I'm excited to get in front of people, to get in front of colleges, high schools, companies, HR departments. I'm excited to get this program in the hands of people and then just watch what happens with folks, get to hear the stories of how people are getting unlocked and unstuck and start living the lives they're supposed to live. And I'm excited about 10 years from now when we can look back and in a lot of ways, we'll never know the stories. We'll never get to know what happens to these people that go through U School because it'll still be working itself out. So I'm just stoked about that. I love, love, love when someone gets an insight about themselves and it's true, and then they start to live and think differently.
Scott, I love the passion and the energy behind your voice when you talk about things that you're just so passionate about. And if you guys listening could see Scott right now, he's lit up, and he's really going to go out and make a difference. I mean, he's very focused on his goals and his mission, and I'm glad that he's found it. Scott, go ahead and give yourself a plug so all the listeners can get in contact with you.
Well, our website is theuschool.com, and it's YOU, theuschool.com. We're active on every social media channel, so you can follow us on Twitter and Facebook and Instagram, all that stuff. You can find me personally on that website. My email's on there. You can follow me on Twitter. A lot of the connections that I'm hoping to make are introductions to schools, colleges, and high schools. So if you're working there, I'd love to connect with you. And also we do private U School guiding for folks that don't have a group of people to go through U School with. We'd be happy to help. Just reach out to us on email. And there's also this space for us in U School for people to work alongside what we're doing. We don't call them facilitators, we don't call them teachers, we call them guides, because that's what we think we're doing, is we're guiding people through a process, guiding them through life. So there's this part of working with us called a U School guide. And if you have experience with students, if you've already done some of the work of self-discovery and you can stand in front of a group of students and talk about that comfortably with conviction, we'd love to hear from you. So go ahead and reach out, and we'd love to start a conversation.
All right, Scott, thank you so much for sharing your story with the Knowledge for Man community. I mean, you gave us a ton of valuable content. And for those of you listening who are interested in working with Scott and the U School, I mean, pay attention to what he just offered as a U School guide, where you're kind of a facilitator of the class or of this wherever you're speaking, and you can get an opportunity to really impact a lot of lives. And this isn't just located in San Diego only. You can be located anywhere in the country. So check out theuschool.com and get in contact with Scott, and you can go from there. Scott, thank you so much for being on this show, and I really appreciate you spending your time with my community.
Appreciate it, Andrew. I'd love to be a part of what you're doing.
All right, and that's going to wrap up episode 47 with Scott Schimmel from the U School. All right, and I know this is a longer episode, but I do have a challenge for you, and it's one that can definitely impact and change your life. Okay, so just after interviewing Scott Schimmel, he did have a series of questions that he mentioned in the knowledge round, and I want to repeat them, and I want you to actually do these. I didn't want you to just listen to the episode and say, hey, those are really good questions, those are really impactful, and then nothing happened. I want you to write down these questions, sit in silence, go to a park, go outside, get some peace. Don't bring any technology with you. Don't bring your phone. Don't bring anything. Just relax. And here are the questions that I want you to write down, and then I want you to answer these questions when you're outside. So the questions are, who are you? What is the story that you are already telling about your life? What is the trajectory that you are on? If you don't do anything else right now, where will you end up? What would be the worst case scenario 20 years from now, 10 years from now, or 5 years from now? Okay, so those are the questions. Write those down now or as soon as you can, or come back to this episode and then listen to this ending part. Write them down and answer these questions, okay? I want to hear from you. You can email me at andrew@knowledgeformen.com, or simply just go to facebook.com/knowledgeformen and share your responses. All right. Look forward to hearing from you. Until next time. Thank you for listening to the Knowledge for Men podcast show. It's been a pleasure having you be a part of a thriving community of men who want to crush it in all aspects of life. I'm on a mission here to inspire millions of guys, and with your help, we're going to make a dent in the universe. Check out knowledgeformen.com for a ton of free content that's designed to help you live a remarkable life. Again, that's knowledgeformen.com. I hope to see you there. And always remember, 2014 is the official year of the crush, where we take action to get the life we've always dreamed of. This is your host, Andrew Farabee, and until next time, let's do it.